Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live, where we're examining today's digital revolution in all its various aspects, which certainly have become more profound and wide-ranging, and I think quite personal to all of us over the last 6 months. Our guest today is one of our regular monthly digital all-stars, Tony Uphoff, who's the CEO of Thomas, which was a 120-year-old family-owned trade media company until about 3 years ago, when the founders, and as well as Tony and the family there, have been undergoing their own digital transformation, turning Thomas and its key data platform, ThomasNet, into a critical source of data and insights for the industrial and manufacturing markets. Tony, as always, welcome back to Cloud Wars Live.
Hey, Bob, great to see you. And by the way, greetings from the West Coast offices of Thomas. So we made the transition out from New York a little while ago, and we're going to spend some time in California here.
Good, good. And Tony, is it true that on each episode you're on, you will play and sing a song using each of your guitars?
Bob, that's without question. I think the real question is, do you want to edit that out and not subject your listeners to my lack of skill or musical ability?
No. I see this happening. It could be an offshoot, Cloud Wars Live.
Right.
Unplugged. Yes, unplugged.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. I think Dr. Lockhead's going to give you a run there, but
there you go.
We'll see. We'll see. Tony, well, the place looks great. I hope it's been a nice experience on the West Coast for you. And as always, I think, Tony, you've come up with some interesting ideas. And I just, as a reminder to the audience, from Tony's perspective with Thomas, the company and a lot of the services that Thomas has created allows it to see emerging patterns in what manufacturing companies and industrial companies are trying to source, what they're buying, shifts in the nature of that whole business, supply chains and so forth like that. So it's great that, Tony, you've got this really ringside seat there, being able to watch some profound changes in industrial markets and what's going on there. So it looks like today, as always, you've come with some interesting ideas to chat about.
Yeah, Bob, it's interesting. So as you and I have talked about before, we do have this rather unique window into the industrial economy. Every second, someone's evaluating or sourcing a product or evaluating a supplier on thomasnet.com. And I think we're a little over 3 petabytes of buyer behavior data and growing. So it gives us this rather interesting view. We also have about 11,000 customers that we spend a tremendous amount of time, and these are advertisers looking to reach engineers and procurement managers on the platform. And one of the things that's been coming up a lot with customers is they're working with their own customers around what they're now referring to as the customer experience. And for many folks, particularly companies that are perhaps coming from a software background, this idea of the customer experience, and I think it's increasingly true in what I'll call modern product design today. But a lot of manufacturing companies have not thought about the customer experience. What they've thought about is customer service. I have a good customer. I manufacture for a component for Tesla, and they've got a 3-year agreement with me. It's for X volume each month, and the failure rate of those products and services is within tolerable range. And then customer service might be around things like delivery dates, price consideration, changing of lot size or whatever, and the day-to-day relationship that you might have. What's starting to change for a lot of our customers is they're realizing that they can get high marks for a survey around customer service, but if they ask the same customer to give them perspectives around the customer experience, they're getting very different data back, and the conversation is changing. And so it's fascinating to us that we think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in the way that companies start to think about this. And, a simple example, Bob, would be if I go through 2-step distribution, I might do a customer service audit and everything looks great. If I do a customer experience audit, I might hear something very different touch points. And so we think we're at the early stages of the manufacturing industry start to look at the world a little differently. And I'm not saying customer service doesn't matter. I'm not saying that at all. But perhaps the preemptive approach to understanding at a very level the customer experience might actually be the best customer service that you provide.
Yeah, that Tony, that's wild. A couple thoughts on that. One, I think sometimes we fall into a trap of thinking it's an either or. I can do the
Yeah.
service or the
Yeah.
experience thing, but I think what you're saying here is it's indeed both, but they are different. And a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to have a fascinating conversation with the Microsoft's chief medical officer, and he was making a similar point where he said that. Uh, when we talk about improving the patient experience in healthcare, said there's a lot of things you can do specifically focused around the patient. He said, but also a big component of that is if you improve the experience of the clinician, then the clinician will be able to help drive a better
Interesting.
experience back
Sure.
over to the patient. So each,
Sure.
as you're describing there, each level in that chain has to be sort of on the same page, right? About, are we delivering not just the service, but that higher level experience?
Well, it's interesting, and it's what a great example. One of our customers was describing to me that they had done for the better part of a decade customer service surveys, and they thought they were really advanced at this. They would do them quarterly, they would compare them, executive bonuses were tied to these things. And he said what was interesting is he said, we never learned anything from the customer service surveys that we fed back in to product development. Not once. He said, we started down this path of trying to understand, where I'm going with this, the customer experience. All of a sudden, it wasn't always bad news. A lot of it was, what I'd like? I'd like this feature, or I'd like this payment model, or I'd like this distribution model. And what he was saying is a lot of their best ideas over the last 24 months have really come by trying to figure out what are the right questions to ask and the touch points, which is a whole nother area of study, but to go after this idea of the customer experience. Because it's, again, as I said before, it's not always bad news. They're not complaining, but they're maybe observing something that you don't yet offer that, could be an opening for you to develop a new line of business.
Wow. Tony, it seems in some ways obvious, but it's always obvious from a distance. And then, as you
Right.
said, you get into a manufacturing area where for decades they've pounded, service is the top priority. Then you get to two-step distribution and multiple other things. And we can always invent ways to say, well, it's too difficult. My industry doesn't really work that way. But the overriding thing here, I think, especially in today's bizarre world that we're in, that customer experience has taken on an elevated level, right? A restaurant, says, oh, my food is so wonderful and so fresh, I can't be bothered with delivery or curbside pickup, right? Well, okay, you're going out of business, but you go ahead and, you stick to your internal control. So every company's had to remake itself.
Right, Bob. And you remember, Bob, boy, I think he in this context is the legendary Regis McKenna. I think he wrote the Harvard Business Review piece on, I want to say he referred to it as the product experience is everything, or the product is everything, or the total product experience. Maybe is too many takes at that, but I believe that was it. And he was making the point that you just made, which is even if you don't control some components, the customer doesn't care. It's part of the customer experience. So if your delivery is bad and you say, well, I don't control the delivery. Yeah, you do. It may be a different company, but that's part of the customer experience. And I won't name names here, but if the delivery service that you're using is slow or unprofessional, or the image is wrong with your brand, your customer sees that. Now, you may not pay attention to that because you're just thinking, hey, who cares about logistics? Cheaper is better. So I think that kind of total product experience is a piece of what we're talking about here. And for a lot of your listeners, Bob, they're probably thinking, well, this isn't new. That's correct. It is not new, but it is something that is increasingly an area of focus in the manufacturing industry, which historically has really been about capability, because these capabilities don't come everywhere. It's hard to find these capabilities, and so once you find them, it's more really about hey, I want to make sure that my customer service is good. Customer experience has been an area that hasn't been focused on as much in manufacturing.
Well, Tony, a brilliant, brilliant mind that we both knew, and he's somebody who influenced my thinking as much or more than anyone else, was the former professor at the business school at the University of Michigan, C.K. Prahalad.
Yes.
And he came up once with this idea about the 3 stages of competitive advantage. And he said early on, he said it was manufacture and sell. And then he got into the listen and respond. And he said the 3rd state, which I think we're really moving toward, is anticipate and lead.
Yes.
So all those
Yes.
pieces that you talked about, it isn't necessarily new, but if a company chooses to forsake tapping into the reactions, the impressions, the ideas, the innovation, and the great new ideas that are held in the minds of people who are giving you money, that just seems today like a terrible idea. So the customer inclusion in that co-creation of value, co-creation of innovation, co-creation of just marginal improvements that cumulatively have such a profound impact, it all makes sense in this conversation we're having. But I suspect inside some companies, the cultural challenge to bring that to bear, because Tony, like you said a few minutes ago, all those contracts for years and MBOs have been written around service. Well, now we've also got to keep that at the highest level, but bring this other stuff into it as well. It's got to be hard, but that's some of the new leadership today, right?
And Bob, to your point, I think there are also new technologies. Before we went on air, you and I were talking about edge computing and the impact that it is, but will increasingly have, certainly in the industrial marketplaces. And it's just really so inspiring and exciting to watch that. But the days of having to do a survey that trails the customer experience by 90 days, and then you pore over the results of the survey and all that kind of stuff, data plays a really unique role here, right? So, if you think about edge computing spinning out real-time data is a way of monitoring the customer experience based on usage. I think it was you that told me the shift that Salesforce went through, where instead of benchmarking their customer success folks on revenue, they started to benchmark their customer success folks on how much usage of Salesforce.com the customer was doing. And that sounds simple. That's a pretty profound shift, and I think a very powerful one. And maybe what I'm attempting to unpack here is a similar dynamic here around this idea of the customer experience and what will be those technologies and the data that will enable companies to be able to improve it.
Well, Tony, there's one follow-up point I want to make on that, but first I just wanted to offer a word from our sponsor, BMC. In a world that's changing faster than ever before, the biggest challenge for businesses is creating fabulous customer experiences. That objective requires actionable insights and real-time agility from one end of your business to the other. At BMC, they call this the autonomous digital enterprise, and they've put together a set of solutions to help you anticipate what's coming, adjust accordingly, and acknowledge those changes from end to end. To start your journey to the autonomous digital enterprise, visit bmc.com/ADE. Tony, yeah, the related point that I wanted to make on that was, what you're an expert in, you and Thomas here with industrial and manufacturing companies. I suspect, one of the episodes you did that drew the largest audience 4 or 5 months ago was about, Google's a manufacturing company, Apple, a lot of these companies that we thought were not manufacturing, in fact, are. So these definitions of what is an industrial company, what's a manufacturing company, it's moving and exploding. I think all those things of additive manufacturing are just going to add into that. And this notion that certain business approaches and good ideas apply over here in these B2C worlds, they don't really apply over, and it's just nuts. So I think we have to all force ourselves to unlearn some of those hard-earned lessons that have taken years. We've just got to see the world through very different, fresh eyes right now.
Well, now, if you think about it, a lot of these terms that we use of identifying companies by certain categories, if we're really honest, they were set up for financial metrics and financial purposes, right? So, you know, I've never spent time with Elon Musk. I would love to. What a fascinating character. But, you know, he is positioning a company that bends steel for a living called Tesla in a very different way. So he'd rather not be valued as an auto company. He'd rather be valued as a tech company because it's helped in the run up of this remarkable company that he's developed. But at the same point in time, as we've talked before, he is deploying technology in a very different way. And I think we are at such a fascinating time, you know, whether you want to call it Industry 4.0, which is one of the umbrella terms that's used, the IIoT phenomenon of the industrial Internet of Things. We're starting to redefine what people think of as manufacturing. And when you go down the list, Apple is one of the largest manufacturers, most valuable, and one of the largest manufacturers in the world. So is Microsoft, so is Google, certainly so is Amazon. And I think we're starting to reframe our understanding that this isn't our grandfather's manufacturing industry anymore. You know, it's a very different world. It's a convergence of these remarkable digital technologies, along with, in many cases, traditional industrial manufacturing.
Yeah, Tony, and as you've talked about a few times here, to be able to capture that data, weave it in the right way to help frame what's going on with that customer experience is so vital. And whether it's the industrial category where you're an expert or any other field, to how powerful that is. So I thought it was intriguing that you wanted to follow up this notion about customer experience with something about data and coding literacy,
Yeah,
and what
yeah.
you see happening with that these days.
Well, you know, Bob, you and I have talked before that, you know, and I'll apply this most acutely to the industrial and manufacturing markets. I've had people ask me about the skills shortage, and there's a huge skills shortage. And what that basically means is there are not enough skilled people to fill the open jobs in North American manufacturing. And I've been asked, well, are these white collar jobs or these blue collar jobs? And I kind of developed a catchphrase response to that of saying, hey, it's the wrong question. These are new collar jobs, and they would represent what you and I are describing, Bob, this remarkable convergence between advanced technology and, you know, the art and science, right, that's going on in the manufacturing industry today. And so we've been spending a lot of time just thinking through, well, as this transition starts to accelerate, what are the skill sets of these new collar roles, whether they be in manufacturing, and let you and I speak even more broadly. I think about it as our own company. And there are two that we're really acutely focused on, whether it be on behalf of the market that we monitor or certainly across our 375 employees at Thomas. The first is data literacy, and you and I have touched on this before. I really think that increasingly table stakes coming into graduating college, coming into your first role, or for those of us that have been in business for a while, I think we all have to lift our game in data literacy. And I'm not talking about being able to create a data spreadsheet here in Excel. I really mean being able to manipulate data, to be able to analyze data, and to be able to spot patterns in data. I think boy, I look at my own role, Bob, and I'm an expert on the impact of technology. I am not a technologist, but at the same time, boy, if I had to really up my game in understanding how to work with data. And I think the second thing is, I think we've got both these programs happening at Thomas right now. I think a basic level of coding literacy. So as an example, I'm taking a Python 3 course on Code Academy as we speak. Wow. Not because I'm going to be writing a lot of code. Trust me, our CTO would be sleepless if he heard that. But I want to have a better understanding. Yeah, there might be some simple things that I could do, but if I look at the level of time I'm spending on technical issues, I need to up my game. And so, long-winded way of saying, Bob, I think whether folks that are listening might be early in their career, or they're folks at my stage or your stage of a career, I think these are skill sets that we all need to lift, because I think that the job requirements going forward are going to require a much more facile ability in data and a much more facile or agile ability to understand, is this in the range of something we could build, or do we need to partner for it, or do we need to buy it? And so I think having a better understanding of coding, frankly, has helped me in that kind of decision tree of, hey, we've got a team of developers. Should we be able to develop this? Or is there an let's call it off the shelf, package we could acquire? Or do we need to partner with a development shop that's got chops that we just simply don't have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Tony, it's fascinating as you mentioned that, and trying to put that into context. What is the realm of the specialists? What is then the province where leaders and decision makers have to have enough fluidity or fluency with the technology, the code, the approach, the thinking that goes behind it? Like, is this tying in with where we all over as an organization intend to go? Or is this going to be one of those things that gets us, 3 months behind on something? And Tony, maybe if you'd like, I'll forward over to you. Last week, I gave a keynote talk at an event, an online event. It was called Fierce AI Week. And one of the things I did within that, I just did a little quiz, 8 or 10 questions. I asked people like, is your company data curious? Are you data literate? Are you data driven? And just, and things similarly then about AI, is there like the AI clique over here that does all the cool stuff, and they speak in a different language, and other people aren't invited to eat at their lunch table and those sorts of things. And what I thought was interesting was afterwards, some of the reaction and feedback I got, these are from people with, PhDs in computer science, specialists in AI, been developing this. He said, those questions are really great. To me, I thought they were somewhat obvious, but we get up so close to the nitty gritty of some of this stuff that to come back and drive at that cultural side of it. Tony, one other thing I just want to mention, because I think what you're saying here is so vital. I had a chat last week with the chief digital officer of Novartis, certainly a new age manufacturing company. And one of the things that he said was, it was important for people to understand in the company that only 1 in 10 of the molecules that the pharmaceutical industry as a whole create ever make it out of clinical trials and into the marketplace. 1 out of 10.
Wow.
And he said, what if you could make that 3 out of 10? And he said, we can do more surveys. We can, do this and that. He said, this is a data problem. He said, it's 100%. It's a data problem. And he said, it's essential then that we create a data culture here. So whether you're a biologist working with data, whether you're a data scientist coming in this way, whether you're, an AI specialist working on, deep seated, biomedical reactions that people are having out in the field, that common way of coming back to it has to be driven around data. So I think your idea here is fascinating, even up, as you said, to that point of some coding literacy.
Well, and I think, Bob, there's a topic you and I've talked about before, which is, the democratization of data. And all that really is just a buzzy way of saying, push the data down to the people who are proximity to an application to deploy it on benefit of the company or a customer, right? This isn't rocket science. But to democratize data, we've got to have a certain level, right, of data literacy, because otherwise it just exacerbates the silo. If all I do is, hey, I got access to this data, but I got to go call this guy, Bob Evans, to have him explain to me what it means, it defeats the whole purpose of what we're talking about. And I do think these things, to your point, are linked, is then, having the ability to understand, could I go in and, work with this data a little bit? Could I write a little program that might allow me to get an alert or an update? And, I think these are huge opportunities for us as we kind of up level our own education and develop people. I think you're going to see, certainly we're doing it in our company. And since we've done some of those things, Bob, it's remarkable to see where some of the new contributions are coming from, because we're attempting to democratize the data. And we've got people that are looking at all kinds of legacy data and spotting patterns that, frankly, none of us ever saw.
Tony, I want to ask you to talk about that some, and that you've always been a big advocate for learning and training, and now because the online education, online training can be so powerful helpful and so effective. And right in today's world here in August 2020, it's there aren't a lot of alternatives, right, to that sort of training or education. But one last thought about the data. I think an executive you and I had admired, Jim Barksdale, who, from his days at FedEx and then over at Netscape. And he would often open up meetings by saying, I'm looking for data here, people, not opinions. He said, if you got data, let's see it. If you have opinions, we'll go with mine.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. And, I think it was Drucker that it was the actual person that said, in God we trust, all others bring data. There's a lot of these. And, I think, to close off on the data point, I think one of the reasons that for me, professionally, I've been such a beneficiary of coming of age at a time when these new technologies were coming online and, really just benefited a great deal by this. But as my career moved along, I always thought I was data driven. And by God, I was using data to make decisions and being very rational. If I'm honest, I probably went through long periods of time where I simply used the data to rationalize whatever the heck decision I chose to make. And having access to this is really giving me, periods of great and positive reflection, of really stopping and saying, hey, am I feeling a sense of cognitive bias here or experiential bias, and really going to kind of second level thinking about, hey, let me make sure I'm really being analytical on the data. And when in doubt, let me get a few other folks to look at this with me. And I'd like to think, old dog, new tricks here, I'd like to think that my decision-making is better because I think I'm being a bit more objective. People I work with are going to watch this and perhaps send me messages to the contrary, but I believe that's what's happening. And I aspire, at least inside Thomas, but I think this is a phenomenon, Bob, that's relatable to a lot of people. I think you're going to see this trend of, increasing data literacy, and let's call it, a base level of coding literacy, become things that are a part of the paradigm of recruit, attract, retain, but develop. How do we develop people inside our companies? And I think these are areas that'll really be important.
Tony, I want to say I admire your courage on, shifting the way you use data, because in the old way that you described, you were never wrong, right?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Why?
I'm going to keep looking to find that data to make sure that it validates the decision I made. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. My brother, the professor, likes to say, data will tell you anything you want it to say. Just torture it long enough.
Right.
And it'll reveal the secrets.
Yeah.
But Tony, talk about what you're thinking here on the idea of online learning, and especially the, profound new importance it's taken on today.
Yeah, I think partly because of the pandemic, Bob, and, shifting our own company, and we're evaluating. We've been a customer, and this is not a promotion, but we've been a customer of a platform called Lessonly. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's very aptly named, and we use that a lot as an educational platform. We have an official data literacy program going, and then we're going to start a coding program where we're looking at providers of those, and these are all online providers. It hits me. I also, as I think I've shared with you, I serve as a trustee to a school called Linfield University. It's a liberal arts private school up in Oregon. Fantastic. Has a nursing program and a residential liberal arts program. Really great school. We've had an online program there for years. It's a degree program. But if I was to look at it, we're a bit stuck. And I think a lot of these online learning programs we're not fully optimizing the online experience, and we're trying to create kind of a hybrid experience. And I don't think we're doing a great job either way. I'll give you kind of a goofy metaphor. You remember when a lot of radio broadcasters would just simply set up a television camera and they'd go on television? Frankly, it was kind of crappy television, because one of the reasons you listen to radio is they're conjuring up imagery. And if they're sitting there just broadcasting, they're not really playing to the camera. It's kind of a goofy experience. I don't think we're there yet in online learning. And with respect to extraordinary, I was raised by academics. I'm a huge fan of higher education by every measure. But I think we're missing the mark here when it is simply a professor teaching a course online. Certainly that has value, but I think we're underestimating the potential of really leveraging an online platform that can pace along with students, that can bring diverse voices and teaching techniques and virtual reality and all kinds of different things that could really drive exponentially in learning. And I'm probably thinking more in K through 12 here, in all candor, Bob, than I am, and I don't know if I'm right on this. I think in higher education, most of the universities have really adapted fairly well to that. And if you go online and take some of those courses, you can see the impact, and Linfield would be a good example. But I feel like we're ripe for a breakthrough in online education. And I'm not talking about online degrees. I think that's one component of this, but it's only a small component of it. I think the idea of ongoing education and being able to educate people in companies for people's personal hobbies and interests, I think we're just scratching the surface. And I haven't found any other companies that are out there, and I don't want to start naming names. They're all fine, but no, I don't think anybody's really leading the pack in that area. And I kind of feel like I'm sure somebody's, some smart venture person or somebody's looking at this stuff and thinking, hey, somebody's got a better mousetrap in this area, or come up with a novel approach to this. But I think regardless of your beliefs on how long the pandemic's going to restrict our ability to easily move around, I think what we're going through is going to accelerate the use of online learning, regardless of whether we return in force to a classroom type of environment in the near term or not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Tony, I'm going to ask our producer extraordinaire, Bill Kozel, maybe in the episode notes for this, to include a link to this other episode that I'm going to mention. But one of the other digital all-stars, Sean Ammirati, I noticed a few months ago that his setup, his studio had changed and become much more. Well, it wasn't just Sean behind a desk with a white wall behind him. He stands up, he's got a big monitor, he's got a whiteboard behind him and other things. And he said it's changed completely sort of how he conducts meetings, workshops with big companies, how he does his Carnegie Mellon Business School teaching, how he works with some of the companies that his venture firm actually works with there. And he said it's much more interactive. So I think to your point of just don't, just take a talking head in front of a classroom and just pop it up online, but rather he said you bring to bear all the different tools that online can harness and pull together with this. And he said it's been quite remarkable. And he said they've gotten to a point either with workshops with big companies or in his teaching or with his portfolio of venture companies. He said we've moved in the past few months much more quickly up this sort of learning curve than I ever thought would have been possible.
Interesting.
And he said, as you said before, it's inspiring people to come up and say, oh, well, if we can do that, then why can't we try this? So not a, what do they call it, classroom without walls, but a classroom without too many rules about, this is how we do it. And, that's that. And if you want any changes, wait 6 months until, next semester. That this has got to be something we tinker with relentlessly, right?
Yeah. And I think to your point, and not a surprise that Sean's innovating in this area, given his background and the range, the diversity of projects from academia to venture capital that he's involved in. I love to see that. I think one of the big challenges that we face in a primarily remote world is that the brainstorming, whiteboarding is, the ideation and all that kind of stuff is one component of it. I think culturally what people forget about that experience is it's also actually a cultural bonding experience. Mm-hmm. What you're actually doing is you're aligning, ideas and thoughts. You're learning about these other people. And there's actually a very profound connection that happens through that experience of, oh, this guy, Bob Evans, I never thought of that. How cool is that idea? And you come out of those sessions and maybe your actual takeaway is 15 to 20% of the content, but that doesn't mean that the other 85% of what went down isn't hugely valuable. trust gets built. The willingness to say things that may not make sense in front of your peers, all those things. I think in a remote environment, until we understand how to do those things, we miss those things that I think, we run a meeting at Thomas this morning where we were talking about this exact issue about, that's what brainstorming and whiteboarding really does, but you don't tend to think about the halo benefit, if I can use that term, or whatever you want to call it. We tend just to think about that 15%, if you will.
Tony, the chief digital officer from Novartis that I mentioned recently, one of the anecdotes that he brought up, he said one of the favorite parts of his job is, he said he wanders around this, it's the Novartis and Microsoft have jointly set up this thing of the AI lab. And he said, one of the things that I most enjoy about my job, I walk around down there, and he said, I truly cannot tell who's Novartis employee, who are the Microsoft employees. He said,
interesting.
That's exactly that sort of, infused thing where people get so focused in the work, the interactive capabilities are there. And more so, I think it leads to that productive type of thing where people are focused on the problem, not like, well, wait a minute, I've got to count the minutes here. Am I going to have to bill them more now that I've exceeded? And when you've got, as he said, one molecule out of 10 actually makes it into the market, there's a lot of progress to be made. So these new ways of fusing organizations, probably leading to that cultural breakthrough in a lot of areas that you just described, Tony, maybe also gets people tied in a little bit more to that data culture, right? They're focusing on the right things and engaging in the right ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, before I forget, Bob, speaking of data, we recently launched something, it's free and your users might get a kick out of it. If you go to business.thomasnet.com/TMX, stands for Thomas Manufacturing Index. So we've put together exactly what it sounds like, and we're breaking it down by vertical market. So your listeners can go on and look at that. You can subscribe to our daily email newsletter and have this sent to you. But it's showing some fascinating trends. And I think in the spirit, Bob, of your point on data analytics, what we're finding is people across our marketplace are starting to take this type of data and map it to broader economic trends. We got a group of folks that have been taking our PPE sourcing data and overlaying infection data by state on top of that data. And guess what they found? PPE sourcing tends to precede what ends up happening in confirmed infection data on the pandemic. So anyways, I've become a data geek, as you can tell, but some of your listeners might really enjoy seeing it. And again, it's free, and we constantly update TMX so they can get a sense of what's happening in the industrial economy.
Tony, that's
business.thomasnet.com/TMX.
Outstanding. Well, Tony, always a pleasure talking to you. It looks like you've settled into the new West Coast wing of the Thomas headquarters there quite nicely. I hope that's going real well for you.
It is indeed. And as always, Bob, it's great to catch up, and best to the family. And I look forward to our next conversation.
All right, Tony, thanks a million. And folks, thanks to all of you for being with us here at Cloud Wars Live. We are really, I think, digging in on some interesting subjects these days. The feedback from all of you out there in the community, the listenership, the follow-up has been heartwarming. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being with us. We look forward to seeing you next time here at Cloud Wars Live.